It is our pleasure to bring in the voice of the Green Bay Packers. It still slightly pains me to say that because, of course, I grew up with Wayne calling Bears games. Super Bowl 20, top of the list. But he's been gone for a long time now. Of course, it did the Bulls on WGN forever. I was watching some of the intros today because you're going to have to tell a Michael Jordan story before you leave today, Wayne. You can think about that for a second. But let's talk about this week, Bears, Packers, and everyone talks about the rivalry. But it hasn't really been a rivalry until now. Like, this game matters for the first time in forever. So it's a new level, and we haven't been here in a long time. How do you look at the Bears right now, and how are you looking at this game this week?
Well, I mean, I think I looked at the Bears like most people in the NFL for the first, 9-10 weeks of the season with skepticism. Their record was built on their opponents were under 40% winning percentage as they built that record. But you had to respect what they were doing because they had the good record. And then you said, okay, we're going to find out about the Bears in Philadelphia. We're going to find out about the Bears. Well, we found out about the Bears. They're pretty damn good, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, it's physicality has kind of come back to Chicago here with Ben Johnson. And obviously, Green Bay is familiar with Ben Johnson with everything he brought to Detroit from an offensive perspective. So when you look at that and how he's been able to come over to Chicago and, obviously it's not a finished product by any means offensively and what they're doing, but what are you seeing from Ben Johnson, or what have you seen that, is something that, gives you cause for concern or something that you pay attention to in terms of what makes him great?
Well, usually a team, an organization takes, when they hire a new head coach, takes two steps back, as it takes time for that coach to get his influence in the locker room, his playbook, and everything else put together. It takes the personnel department time to get the right players to fit what they want to do now with this new coaching staff. But that hasn't been the case here. And I'll go back to something just the other day that Xavier McKinney, the all-pro safety of the Packers, said. He said, I knew these guys were good last year. They didn't have a good record, but they were good. They had talent. And, so he said, I'm not surprised at all where they're at, because he felt they were good last year and they were very close, but they just weren't winning the close games last year. Caleb Wlliams was getting sacked, about 68 times, something like that last year. And so they weren't very well coached, is the point. And now they come in, you put Dennis Allen on that defense, Ben Johnson coming in with the offense. Caleb Wlliams looks like rough around the edges, yes, but he's a guy who's no longer getting sacked 4 times a game. He's got that down under 2 times a game. And he's a very good athlete, very good escapability. I'm not sure about his accuracy. It hasn't been very good for the most part. And the thing he does that a lot of young quarterbacks do, they miss layups. They miss the passes they should make. They miss, and they'll throw a ball that you sit there and say, my gosh, how did he get that into that window? So the inconsistency is there. And we've seen it with Caleb Wlliams a little bit. But the one thing is, and the one thing I'll say about last year, many times he didn't quite get it done, but he brought his team back time and time again. I remember that Thursday night game against Seattle at Soldier Field where the Bears and Seahawks played just God's honest awful football, but there was Caleb Wlliams down the stretch marshaling his team back into position. Earlier in the season, he marshaled them back into position against the Packers, and it was a fingernail. Carl Brooks, had he gotten a manicure that week, that kick goes through. He got it by a fingernail and preserved a win for the Packers. But Caleb Wlliams brought the Bears back and put them in position. And then the last week of the season, I understand the Packers aren't trying to win the game. Their playoff fate is all set. But Caleb Wlliams drives the Bears down there against a good Mark Hafley defense, puts them in position to win. And this time, Cairo Santos gets the ball to the upright. So this kid is good. There's no question about that. He has all the ability. It's easy to see his athletic ability. Will he become a great quarterback? I think he has the intangibles to do that. I think he's got to clean some things up, and he's got a great coach with him to do that.
Let's flip it to the other side, because there's all this talk consistently about Jordan Love. Is he or isn't he? Is he in the top 5? I mean, you look at his just pure numbers, 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's phenomenal. You watch the game on Thanksgiving. The 4th down throw to win the game was incredible with the guy in his face. And yet you also watch him other times like, how do you miss that throw? So you see him every week, Wayne. How do you break down Jordan?
Jordan was very much like that his first year as a starter. He was missing the layups, that kind of thing. We were wondering about his accuracy. Improved last year, and I think a little bit more improved this year. I mean, every quarterback's going to miss some throw, and you sit there and say, how did he miss that guy? But every quarterback is going to have that. But the ones who are really good, you only see it once in a while, and that's where we're at with Jordan Love. Is he a top 5 quarterback? I don't know. Boy, you go through that list of who's in the top 5, but he's top 10. I can guarantee you that. And is he good enough to take a team to the Super Bowl? Yeah. Is he a first ballot NFL Hall of Famer like Favre, like Rodgers? I don't know. Probably not. But is he good enough to get you to the Super Bowl? Absolutely.
One game on that note, Favre or Rodgers, who's Wayne Larrivee taking?
Rodgers.
Can you reason why? Because there's a hit factor for Brett.
No, I love Brett. Don't get me wrong. I love Brett Favre. Love him as a player. Loved him as a gunslinger. Very colorful. But if I got the game on the line coming down the stretch, I'm worried Brett's going to throw an interception. I'm not worried about Aaron Rodgers in that case.
Fair enough.
In that regard, in terms of Jordan, because I think Jordan, the thing that I credit him, that a lot of Bears fans I think try to push against him, is he's not afraid to throw in any window. And sometimes that gets him in trouble. So I guess when you talk about Rodgers or Favre, who does Jordan Love lean closer to in terms of whether the gunslinger or the guy that can kind of break you down mentally and beat you because he understands everything in front of him?
He's a little bit of Brett Favre, a little bit in those throws you mentioned, but he's mostly Aaron Rodgers. That's who he grew up with. That's his mechanics, the way he handles things in the pocket. Underrated skill that he has is that he manipulates the pocket quietly, but very well. The Packers don't have, in the previous 5 years, the Packers have had a top 5 offensive line. They don't have that this year, okay? It's reflected especially in the running game, but it's also reflected in some of the pressure that teams are able to get on the Packers quarterback. But Jordan Love quietly manipulates that pocket. He has a great feel for sense of pressure, where it's coming from, and how to get away from it. And so I credit him a lot with the low sack totals you've seen in Green Bay this year.
Flipping it to the defensive side of the ball, obviously, defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt, got hurt in the Lions game. It feels like that's a pretty significant injury for that defensive front. I'm just curious, what are you seeing from this Packers defense? How much does that affect the pass rush? Obviously Micah Parsons is somebody all Chicago is concerned with right now, but what are you looking forward in this matchup in terms of how that pass rush can do without, one of their top defensive tackles?
Well, that's you mentioned it right away, and that's the big concern this week. Devontae Wyatt was developing into a blue chip interior defensive tackle. Okay. Now, most of us don't see those guys because they're in the mosh pit every play. But trust me, he was a guy who was really developing into a penetrator on defense. Big guy who had unusual quickness for a player of his size. And that's what made him special. And he was developing that way. And he and Micah Parsons were doing some nice tricks up front, with Parsons looping into the A gap and pressuring the quarterback from not just the edge, but coming up the middle as well, which I think we'll continue to see, but not probably as effectively as when you have Devontae Wyatt moving people in the direction of the quarterback. Pressure right in the face of the quarterback is still the best pressure you can have, and they were doing that with Devontae Wyatt. Huge loss, not replaceable. Okay, they'll have a lot of guys they'll run in there, and they'll have to do some different things from schematically to compensate for the hole in the middle of this defense. Because not only is Kenny Clark not there, who is a very solid guy against the run, stabilizer in the interior of that defense, he was traded in the Parsons deal. Nobody's crying about that, but he's not there, and now Devontae Wyatt's not there, and now there are big questions up front. And I would expect the Bears, who made yardage on the ground laterally against Philadelphia last week, they're not going to challenge the Packers in that regard because the Packers have too much lateral speed in the second level of their defense, and they've been very good against the run in that regard. Where teams make yardage against Green Bay on the ground, between the tackles. And the strength of the Bears' offensive line, those three interior offensive linemen, they are the key to everything the Chicago Bears are doing offensively.
That jumps all off the tape when you watch Green Bay play. They are fast as hell, and it's like you're not going to do it outside. But I think you're making a great point, Wayne. What I look at you mentioned the offensive line for Green Bay, and I look at Josh Jacobs and I see him popping off and he's running hard. But then I look at his average yards per carry and he's under 4, and I'm trying to figure out why. Is that just because he hasn't gotten enough force up front?
He gets hit almost every run behind the line of scrimmage. That's it. Yards before contact. He doesn't have any. Matter of fact, he leads the NFL in yards after contact. There's nothing wrong with Josh Jacobs. The offensive line isn't quite what it was a year ago.
Yep. Well, there you have it. And that's the Bears up front have not been able to get enough pressure. So this is a very interesting part of this. When you look at the game and you try to figure out where, if you're from you're just looking from a Chicago perspective, where do the Bears have an edge? Does anything jump out at you?
I think in the running game against the Packers defense, although the Packers defense for the most part has been good against the run, but a lot of their statistics, if you look, they're X number of yards this season against the run. I think it's under 100 or right around 100. Well, a lot of that was the first 2 weeks of the season where they gave up 58 yards in 2 games. Lately, teams have been able to move the football on the ground on occasion against this Green Bay defense, and I think they're going to test that. The Bears, I think, will test them on the ground. You might see some token passes early on because Ben Johnson will be saying, Green Bay's expecting this, so we'll throw we'll be a little pass heavy the first series or so. But I think for the most part, where the Bears feel like they have an advantage is on the ground game against the Green Bay defense, even though the season statistics may not bear that out. What you're dealing with now is trends, okay? Tell me what this team is the last 5-6 weeks of the season, okay? The Packers defense is not a top 10 rush defense in the last month of the season. The Bears offense is top of the heap in the last, 6, 7, 8 weeks since their bye week on the ground.
100%.
It's very rare when the Bears and Packers are both playing for the top of the NFC conference. Typically it's the Bears' reason for that being the case, but now we kind of worlds are kind of colliding here for the Bears and Packers in a way that the rivalry isn't always the case. And so I'm just curious, just from a fan perspective or a vibe perspective, how it is here in Chicago. Anytime a team is good, the city just explodes and the passion is running wild right now for the Bears. And so I'm just curious, from the Packers' point of view, is there, we understand you guys have always kind of looked at us like, you guys are over here, we're not worried about you. Is there any kind of worry or concern building for what's happening here in Chicago because of Ben Johnson and everything that's kind of come together?
Yeah, it's starting to build in that regard. I've done every Bears-Packers game since 1985. I think that's 81 total, because one of them was the NFC Championship game in 2010. The problem with this rivalry has been in the 80s and into the early 90s, the Bears dominated. Then the Packers took over with Holmgren. They've been dominating. Now for 30 years, they've been dominating this series. And once in a while, Lovie Smith, who was a great head coach in Bears history, in the mid-2000s, 2006, had that Super Bowl team. And then, 2010, you saw the real competitive balance of these two teams. And that competitiveness between them was amplified by the fact that they were playing more than just for tradition. They were playing for playoffs and division titles and that type of thing. And that's when it becomes really special. 2013, when they met in Soldier Field last week of the regular season. Remember that game? The winner goes to the playoffs. The loser goes home. The winner not only goes to the playoffs, but hosts a playoff game. It was the NFC North Championship game, and the Packers won on that final play, Rodgers to Randall Cobb. So when these teams play for something more than just the rivalry, then this becomes the rivalry we all talk about for years and years, the number one rivalry in the NFL.
I listened to your call of that play today, Wayne, getting ready for this interview, and the dagger was out, and it was I think you called it the NFC North dagger. It didn't feel good, Wayne.
And that honestly, that's why I've been challenging Carm all season. I've been wanting to bring you on for a few years now as we've been doing this, and it's truly because what he's talking about with that call, like. I need you to understand, Wayne. Like, I didn't grow up. I was born in '85, so I'm more when I reflect on the '90s very fondly with Michael Jordan and the Bulls. And like, you are the voice of my childhood in a lot of ways. And like, honestly, some of my fondest memories as a fan are you on the call calling Chicago Bulls games. And now you do these games with the Packers, and when they beat the Bears and you call there is your dagger, I need you to understand how much that kills me. And it must kill people like Carm even worse, that when you're calling the Super Bowl for the Bears. So it's like, I'm happy for you. I know you're doing great out in Green Bay, but I just need you to understand just how devastated I am every time I hear your sweet sounding voice.
Well, you know what? Chicago has the greatest fans, in my opinion, in the world. And the fact that almost 3 decades later, they're still mad at me for leaving the Bears, that says a lot. And I appreciate their sentiment. The fact is, I guess I had an impact down there. I didn't realize it when I left.
Well, right, Wayne, you were beloved, and Jeff does a phenomenal job, obviously, for, since you left, and there was a little bit of a Gary Bender in there too, but, and I'm good friends with Jeff, but you're the greatest that I've ever heard doing it here. It was unbelievable, and maybe it was because I was so young that the attachment was stronger. It was you and Jim Durham. I was telling you that before, R.I.P. to J.D. But
well, I'm honored.
Yeah, well, here, just maybe on the way out here, 85, it's coming back around again as HBO's doing the shuffle, and we had Gary Fensick on last week, and he's talking about, I'm really thrilled to talk about the Super Bowl shuffle again. But I got to be honest, I watched the shuffle this morning, and I think a tear might have come down my face if I have to admit it. So yeah. I don't know what you remember about when that thing came, or was a young Wayne Larrivee thinking, these guys are completely crazy, or, great decision, you're going to go win the Super Bowl. I watch this team every week. They're this good.
Do you remember the only time the Bears lost was that epic Monday night game in the Orange Bowl, and we get back at, 2, 3 in the morning. And it was the next morning that they actually taped that. And, they had to superimpose some guys in there. I think Walter didn't make the live taping, so there were a couple of the other guys they had to put in there. I think Jim McMahon. And Dan Hampton refused to do it. He said, we haven't won anything yet. But they taped that the day after their only loss. So those guys, they had some balls, man. They knew what they were all about. And that was an epic moment. And what a great anthem that was for that team going to the Super Bowl and the playoffs when it came out.
Well, yeah. I'll have you know that I was born November 29th, 1985. So the first game of my life, the Bears played the Dolphins. In the 85. They ended up winning the Super Bowl that year, but first game out the gate, not great.
When I heard they were out in Miami the night before, they were having a good time. That team had all the characters.
So it's not my fault.
It was warm. They were allowed to lose one. It doesn't matter. It would have been sweet to go 16-0, but it's still the only Super Bowl that we've all seen.
Guys, you know what I always thought? It would have been sweeter if the Dolphins instead of the Patriots made that Super Bowl, right?
Agreed.
Yeah,
100%. Let's get some revenge and kill them. Although I would have been a little afraid because that team was a lot more dangerous than the Patriots were that year.
Final thing, because Carm put you up to it earlier, and we were talking about the Bulls earlier. If any fun story you can share from your memories of calling the '90s Bulls with Michael Jeffrey Jordan, if there's one in particular that stands out to you.
Well, there's so many, but one that I always talk about is when I think we were in Boston the night before on a Friday night, lost a heartbreaker in overtime, whatever it was, and Michael Jordan was seething. And the next morning at practice, they kind of a walkthrough type practice because they had a game Saturday night down at Chicago at the United Center. And Jordan comes in and he is spitting piss and vinegar. And it might be everybody's kind of sleepwalking through this walkthrough, and he just grabs the ball, and all of a sudden it becomes a kick-ass practice. And he kicked ass and took names in that practice and let his teammates know that this was not, hey, no, we are not going to play like this, that because we played the great Celtics to overtime, that was not a win for us. We lost that game, and we're not going to lose tonight against whoever we're playing. And that's the kind of player he was. Jerry Krause, the late Jerry Krause, said, you could debate whether Michael Jordan was the greatest player of all time, but what is not debatable is he was the greatest practice player of all time. And I thought that was very true.
Yeah. BJ Armstrong I saw one of his clips recently. He's like, they should have been videoing practice because it was unbelievable. So you were privileged to get to see that, Wayne. That's awesome. And I could talk bull stories all night long. They used to have it at the old multiplex. You could watch practice, and then Phil Jackson came in and put the curtain down, and that was it for us privileged kids in the north suburbs who got to watch practice and all that. I'll tell you stories another time.
That's pretty cool.
Wayne, we'll let you go. Thanks so much for making time on a busy week as always. We really appreciate it. This was awesome, so thank you.
Yeah.
Well, great to be with you guys. Hopefully it won't be 40 years before I'm back.
No, hey, man, really appreciate you coming on. Honestly,
thank you guys.
Means a lot. Huge fan, even when you're putting the dagger through my heart on those calls. Hopefully not as many daggers for me in the future, but appreciate you very much, Wayne.
All the best, guys. Thank you.